All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Intro to Dental 3D Printing with Eugene Royzengurt. And as the title is already saying, our main guest speaker, our only guest speaker today is Eugene Royzengurt. Um, he is a denturist, adjunct faculty to the American Denturist College, and has his own lab running in Sandy, Utah. So I'm super excited to have Eugene here today. Before we get really started, I would like to give you guys three little pieces of news that we have coming from Ackuretta, and Eugene will be part of this, so this is great. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be attending CDS Midwinter Meeting and LMT Lab Day, so please come by our booth. Eugene will actually be there on Friday as well, because he will actually be giving a lecture. So you still have the chance to sign up. I'll be dropping all those links in the chat later. So that's great news. We actually have another lecture on February 25th with Lee Culp, CDT and CEO of Sculpture Studios. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his name as well. So we're super excited about that one. This lecture is co-sponsored by PacDent, and I think that'll be really interesting. And my final piece of news before we jump into today's webinar is our newest product, the Alpha AI, and Eugene will actually be touching on this as well. The cool news is for everyone, you all can actually download and have access to the 14-day free trial yourself. So I'll send that link as well. And the cool thing about Alpha AI is that it really removes all the guesswork from your slicing process. So any one of you who's already working with Ackuretta printers, you will be familiar with our older slicing software, Alpha 3D. We've upgraded it now to Alpha AI, where you can do auto orientation and auto support settings just using the click of a button. And I think you'll get a good glimpse of that in the presentation later. All right. Coming on to our topic for today. So let me get started by saying a big thank you to Eugene for being here today and for preparing a presentation for all of us on what it means to get started with 3D printing. Eugene will cover the topics from design, resins, and everything surrounding the actual 3D printing. And I'm excited to say he'll provide you with lots of best practices, and he definitely has a lot of experience with that. Please all stay tuned for the live Q&A session at the end, where you'll be able to get some answers from Eugene directly. Be sure to drop your questions in the questions tab that's at the bottom of your screen, and then we can bring those up later. And yeah, so Eugene, before I think we dive into the presentation, I would love to ask you one question. Your path as becoming a denturist wasn't necessarily a straight line, right? So would you mind sharing a little bit, like what brought you into the dental industry in the first place, and how did you kind of get to where you are today?
Well, hi everybody. First of all, and thanks so much for inviting me to do this webinar. I'm really happy to be here to see everybody. Well, kind of see everybody. I can see a list of everybody here, but I am staring at the camera. To answer your question, what brought me into this field? It actually started out a long time ago when I was a little kid growing up. And back in the Soviet Union, when you went to school, they actually took everybody and they took him to this dentist. And in my school, the dentist office was inside the actual school. So they took us all there, and I got to see all of these awesome pieces of equipment. Everything was kind of shiny, all these new toys and everything else. And I got super excited about it. And that kind of brought me into the dental field from that point. And when I got a little bit older, it still kind of was on my mind. And when I was 16, I think about 16, I ended up taking dental assisting courses in high school it was like a concurrent enrollment through college. I became a dental assistant, and from dental assistant, I became a dental technician because my earlier plan to become a dentist kind of didn't work out, and I sort of didn't want to do that. So I became a dental technician because I got more excited about lab work than I did about seeing patients. But down the line, I realized I want to do both, and I still really like prosthetic work quite a bit. So I decided to become a denturist. So that's how I became a denturist.
All right. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to ask always a bit of a personal question about these things just so that we kind of get to know you better for
No, my
everyone.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. Okay, let's get started, I'd say.
Okay, folks, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, just so you guys can see what I'm seeing. Hopefully, and there's my screen right there. So, first and foremost, if you guys look at the screen, there's a little QR code on here. If you got your phone with you, go and scan this. This is my business card, pretty much. It's got all my links, my Facebook, my Instagram, my LinkedIn, my YouTube channel, phone number, address, email, everything on there. So if you guys need to reach out to me or you want to check out some of the videos that I post, feel free to do so. This will make it a lot easier because it's all kind of in one place instead of me just kind of sharing one thing at a time. Okay. I'm going to move forward. Hopefully you guys all had time to take a look. Okay. So today we're going to talk about kind of an introduction to 3D printing, and I'm not trying to make anything too specific. I'm going to be showing obviously my printers, and since I print a lot with Ackuretta Sol, those are the printers that I'm going to be talking about, but a lot of stuff that I will be covering is not printer specific as well. Now, 3D printing is not a luxury anymore. That whole conversation where we talked about, you know what, I'm going to wait, you know what, maybe I don't need this in my practice, you know, I'll make sure everybody else kind of dials things in. It's all fun. However, we're kind of past that point. Okay, because even the labs that don't do anything digital nowadays don't really have a choice in the matter, because a lot of clinicians are getting into digital. A lot of clinicians are getting intraoral scanners because it makes it easier for them. You know, when you have, from the denturist standpoint of view, when you got a patient that's got severely periodontally involved dentition and you need to take an impression, yeah, there are ways you can do this in analog. But sometimes it's just a lot easier to take a nice scan and then be done with it. And then they will end up sending that scan to a lab. And if you are the one that's working with that particular account, they're going to be sending it to you. And if you don't have some kind of digital equipment or something associated with it, now you can obviously outsource it. But over time, when you're going to be getting a lot of the stuff, it just doesn't make any sense to outsource, because you're going to be spending a lot of money paying somebody else versus keeping control of things on your own end and getting better productivity and getting it faster and getting it a higher quality. So now's not the time to wait. Unfortunately, if you guys thought you could wait this whole thing out, it's no longer all up to you. Now, you of course can choose not to take in those clients on, but if I know some of you, and I do know some of you, you probably don't want to take that step. Okay, so what do I usually do in my practice when it comes to 3D printing? So the first thing I started doing is duplicate dentures. Duplicate models. I'm sorry, because over time, especially with partials, it works a lot easier for me to take a model, scan that in with my scanner, and print a replica of that, print a duplicate, so I can process on my stone cast, and then I can fit it to the printed cast. So duplicate models work really well. I no longer have to use hydrocolloid. I no longer have to use silicone. I still use silicone in some cases, but that's a little bit have to do with implant cases and stuff like this. Most of the time, if I'm doing a partial, I'll process on the stone model and fit it to the actual printed model. Custom trays. Absolutely love doing custom trays digitally. I mean, ever since I started doing custom trays and base plates digitally, things have just been working a lot better for me. First of all, I get a much better adaptation of the tray to the model, because I don't have to worry about not blocking out enough or blocking out too much, especially if I'm doing, for example, I'm a big fan of close fitting impression technique. So minimal impression gap on things. So I can just block out the undercuts in 3 shape, or if you want to use something else, at 3 degrees, and then make sure my tray fits nice and uniform. And you just end up, I don't even have to board them all half the time. Just take a nice wash impression and get a really good adaptation of the tray and go from there. You can do things like this. And if you guys are going to be coming to my lecture in Chicago, I'm actually going to be covering a lot of cases that I did with digital and some of the things from start to finish and how I utilize it. So this is one of the cases that I did. I had a patient we were working on that has a severely limited mouth opening due to surgeries and cancer and everything else. So we had to create something that needed to be put in two pieces and then locked inside. This is what we did. So we printed a 3-piece custom tray that we locked inside the patient's mouth to take the impression. Or I do cases like this. This particular case, I needed to create something where the patient had very flared anterior, so I needed to be able to take an impression of the posterior separately from the impression in the anterior and put those things together. So I was able to do that with 3D printing and digital. This is a very interesting case that I did where the doctor sent me first impression for an obturator, and I had good scan of the teeth, but we didn't have a really good scan of the tissues. So we created a custom tray from that. The doctor got a better area, as you can see right here, for the actual obturator, but then I needed to put those two together because here we have good impression of the obturator, but we don't have a good impression of the teeth. So I was able to digitally, after pouring this impression up, as you can see, you can't see the teeth very well, but I was able to digitally merge those two scans together in Mesh Mixer. No, I'm sorry, in Medit Link, and then adjust in Mesh Mixer, creating a much better printed model. Okay, this is another thing that I do quite often, and I'm a huge fan of it: duplicate dentures. If you guys don't do duplicate dentures in your practice by printing them, you're probably spending quite a bit of time doing it by hand. And coming from somebody who's been doing it for a lot of years by hand, it takes forever and it's kind of a pain. Digitally is so much easier. Even if you don't have a lab scanner, which I do highly recommend you guys get, your clinician can scan these chairside with any kind of intraoral scanner and just send you the file, and you can convert that file and print the duplicate dentures, and then you can use it for impressions and stuff like this to create a new set. Or you can make a duplicate for patient to have as a backup in case they break or lose another set. So all of these things. Or you got cases like this where you print with a little recession or a little cutback, and you make them all pretty with composite. This is one of the cases that I've done where you take a duplicate denture. As you can see, the bite was way off because, severe wear on the posteriors caused the patient to protrude forward. So we got really good impressions, but we don't have a good bite. And usually I try to get a bite at the same time. But I was able to digitally create a Gothic arch tracer, so we could also do like an anterior try-in like we did here, and do a Gothic arch tracer to get much better bite registration, so we don't end up messing up patients' bites and things like this. Or you can just do separate Gothic arch tracers. I do those all the time. And if you're dealing with, for example, with implant cases, and I'll be showing in other lectures on actual cases, start to finish, how we deal with this. I love doing these cages for scanning, to create bars, and also for resetting cases. Before I had digital, I actually had to do these things with special articulators and putty and everything like this, and just made things a little bit more problematic. Now that I do these digitally, it makes it a lot easier. And if down the line, for example, with hybrids, you guys know that hybrids don't last forever, obviously. Down the line, patient will need a retread, for example. Like, we will keep the bar, but we need to replace the teeth and everything. As long as I have the model, I can still print another one of these if we lose it, and position the bar back onto the model, do some gingival adjustments when necessary, and just reset the teeth to the same ideal position. I mean, there's many different things you can do. Surgical guides. If you're doing a duplicate denture, surgical guides like I do often nowadays, if you did those by hand before, you used to be covered in acrylic head to toe. Nowadays, it's a lot easier. I just do this in Mesh Mixer and then get them printed and get them out the door. So these are most of the things that I do. Saddles for the partial dentures. Now, either if you want to do like a setup on those saddles, but more often than not, we use this for altered cast techniques. So it works out really well as well. Or you can print study models. There's a huge lineup of things that you can do. This is just some of the examples that people are doing in their lab or in their practice with 3D printing. So your doors are wide open with what you want to do, what you can do with 3D printing. Okay. So these are just a couple of pictures explaining the protocol of what we usually do, how we get things done for if you want to 3D print something. So first things first, this particular picture shows an intraoral scan. And I already explained if you're doing things clinically, you're going to be using an intraoral scanner a lot of times, and then send that file to your laboratory. Unless you're doing printing yourself, because there's a lot of clinicians that do 3D printing in office. But from that point on, when the file arrives, for example, if you're doing like a model, you need to make sure to take that file that you receive. If it was sent through 3Shape through a 3D scanner, for example, it's going to come in a DCM format. So not the format that you're kind of used to using for your CAD CAM. So unless you're using 3Shape to generate your files, you're going to have to convert that to an STL file. The great thing nowadays, there's a program out there, and I'll be talking a little bit more about it down the line, Medit, and they have a lot of cool apps, and it's a free program. And one of the apps that they have within that Medit that can convert that DCM file into an STL file makes it a lot easier to utilize all these different programs. Once you do that, you need to actually convert that file after creating it. You need to convert it to a different file, the file that your printer can read. So you're going to need to use a slicing software, and I'll show you all of these things here today. Once you utilize your slicing software, like Alpha AI is what I usually use with my Soul printers, it creates the file you can utilize to print. So what it does, Slicer just slices the file into these layers. So anywhere from 10, 20 layers to 600, 700 layers, depending on the size of the file. Once you do that, you send it to your printer. Your printer will actually print your model or whatever you're printing. From that point on, you're not done yet. You still have to clean and properly post-process your cases. That's very important, because if you don't follow the protocols all the way through, you're going to end up with a situation where your models are not fitting properly, or if you're printing like a duplicate denture, or you're printing a custom tray or a denture, and it goes in the patient's mouth, you might not be FDA compliant and cause some issues for your patients down the line. And after you post-processed everything, you obviously still have to polish and everything else. Okay, so let's move forward. So today I'm going to be showing you guys stuff associated with the Soul printer, obviously because we're here with Ackuretta, and I love my Ackuretta Soul. I love it so much, actually, about a second one, because it's a nice and reliable printer. I've been pretty happy with it so far. These are not the only printers that I have. I have about 4 or 5 printers, but these are the ones that I mostly use nowadays. And let me actually go back. So the parts that are listed here, like it's plug and play, zero manual calibration, which is a huge part, not just for me, but for a lot of people, especially people that are starting out and don't have the time to kind of learn the whole process from scratch, which I kind of did. So I started out by buying like these cheaper dental printers, non-dental printers. I'm sorry, these cheaper hobby printers. And with those, you run into situations. Well, first of all, they need to be calibrated by hand, so you have to go through the calibration process, and you need to make sure you kind of find parameters for each of the resins that you're going to be using. Now, nowadays they have more resins listed, but oftentimes when you're doing things, you have to calibrate things in by yourself, and creates a problem. So this printer, when I got it, I just literally plugged it in, got everything set up, and chose the resin from the list that I'm going to be doing, sliced the software, and it went from there, and it worked out really well. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So the cool thing about Soul is they're a dynamic optical engine. So it's an LCD printer like many others, but the LCDs in this one, they're utilizing special technology where you can get much better projection of light, and it actually counts for more precise printing and faster printing as well. Okay, and one of the cooler things that I really like about it is the build plate. So that you can get, so it comes with a large build plate that you can print on, but you can also get the medium and the small build plates. What that allows you to do is actually build something faster. So with a small plate, you can print 60% faster. So let's say you need to print a couple of crowns or like a small bridge like a hybrid bridge, you can use that small plate and you get a better print. And kind of the explanation is right here. And it's another reason why I don't recommend people getting like huge 3D printers. They're great if you're doing like you want to print a skull like this, but if you want to have like really precise models, when you have a really big build plate, you're going to have a lot of suction on the on the vat where the resin is, and that suction creates this issues to where the prints are not as precise. So the build plate, you can go bigger, but you don't want to go too big. So Ackuretta Soul has a fairly nice size build plate. I usually print about 4 base plates at a time, 2 models. So it works out great for me. But you can see here the explanation that when you have a smaller build plate, when it kind of goes down into the vat, it doesn't create a lot of pulling forces. So you can go much faster without having to worry about pulling too much. And also you don't need to wait too long for the resin to flow back into place and rest before you can start printing again. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'm going to look at questions a little bit later. I'm just going to explain some of these things. So they have quite a few compatible materials they use. And that's kind of, I like that a lot because I don't want to get stuck using one particular brand of resin. Okay, I like different brands for different things. Like, for example, I like to, nowadays, I use Dentana tray resins for my custom trays and base plates. I use Pack Dent nowadays. Just started using those guys. Really like their try-in resin. Just got it not too long ago. Also like their sculpture for crowns. It's really highly filled ceramic. And I'm testing out some newer resins of them, Medit testing for the denture base. I currently don't print any permanent dentures. Most of the dentures that I print are temporary ones. So either I print it with a pink and a white, or I oftentimes, like if it's a short-term temp, I'll use GC temp resin and do it in white and do with cutback and with Gradiac composite. So you have your choices here. You don't have to be stuck with every single one. And it's an open system. It's a little bit more complex to input your own resins in here. It's still doable. It's just a little bit more complex. But they constantly keep adding stuff to it. And the list is fairly big. So that makes it a little bit easier to kind of dial things in and work with. So so this new Alpha AI slicing software, like I was telling you guys, you need a slicer. It's you don't have to get the paid version. Obviously, there's a free version that you use, but the paid version is an add-on. I'll talk a little bit more about it down the line. It's really cool software. I've been pretty happy with it overall. I've had previous versions that I've been working with for, I don't know, I think about 2 years, maybe a little bit less. So all of these things. This is my favorite. The CLEANI is a cleaning station for alcohol they use after you've print everything. You need to put it into alcohol and clean it for. I usually run about 3 minutes on each cycle. So there's a dirty and a clean. So you put it in the dirty one first, and you run it for 3 minutes, and the whole build plate from the Acuretta Soul fits in there. So I don't have to like remove the prints from the build plate before putting it in there. Now, if you're using a different printer, you can still use this machine, or it's just sometimes the build plates will be too large, so you'll have to just remove the prints first. And then I'll go from here and I'll put it in the second one. After it's been washed, I'll take it out and I'll actually put it in a dehydrator first. So a lot of times you'll see these videos, people will be using like an air gun to just to dry off the alcohol from things, and I'll go straight to curing. I like to use a dehydrator, just a regular food dehydrator, and I'll show you which one I use because it produces a little bit of heat. Oh, you can obviously adjust the heat, but warming everything up, it really makes sure that all the alcohol has evaporated. And a lot of resins actually will require you to heat them up before curing them, or some of them actually require you to heat them up while curing them. So that dehydrator helps out quite a bit to with that process. And once it's done, I have quite a few different curing units that I have accumulated over time, and this one is actually really nice. What's great about it is that there are quite a few already pre-programmed resins in there. So let's say, for example, I'm doing a base plate or a custom tray. So for that resin, I'm going to be using Dentona tray. And now once I've printed everything, once I've um, dried everything, I needed to cure it in there. So I'll put in that box. I'll choose from the menu the resin that I'm using. Just press the button and goes through the whole process. It does need to be updated every once in a while because they do validate new resins all the time. So I have updated mine once, and I'm not 100% sure, because this one you actually have to download the file on the micro SD and update it by yourself, whereas the with the sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, with the printer software and with the slicing software. So the slicing software pretty much updates on its own within the software because it's web based. So they'll put the newer profiles on there, but you do also need to go online and get a newer version if you need to. And the firmware is also, you need to update it through that, but there's no actual physical SD card you need to insert because you have things connected through Wi-Fi and such. But with a CURIE, you need to actually download things onto an SD card and put it in there. It's a fairly easy process. Just make sure, one thing I ran into, because mine came with an SD card and a micro SD card, and I tried to upload things to a different SD card I just had lying around, micro SD card lying around, and it didn't work. I guess the formatting on there was different or something like this. So make sure you kind of watch out for that, because I made that mistake before. Okay. And before I move forward, I want to take a look and see the questions that you guys have. So there's 10 questions. How often do you change bulbs in the curing unit? So with this curing unit, I haven't changed the bulbs at all, and these are kind of all encapsulated. So I'm thinking, I'm not sure if you need to change those out, but over time, obviously, everything breaks. So that's something I would probably reach out to actual Ackuretta and ask them this. One thing I do want to warn you guys about is that make sure within the actual curing units, make sure you clean the glass and everything else thoroughly and fairly often, because you will build up, like from 3D printing and stuff like this, you will build up resin and fumes and stuff like this will coat the areas around the LEDs, and it will diminish the curing potential, which can cause some issues down the line. Actually, second question Dana was asking, if somebody went with a sole printer, would you need to have your curing unit, or will others work? So AutoFlash will work. All you need to do is that you need to get the proper, make sure that it has the proper wavelength, and you need to make sure you get the proper curing times. The reason why I like having everything in one system, because if you're specifically dealing with an FDA thing, when Ackuretta validates a certain type of resin, let's say, for example, I'm using printing a temporary, like a try-in resin for doing a try-in with pack dent try-in resin. So Ackuretta has the profile for the printing, for post-processing. So the curing unit, the washing station, everything else. So you need to print on this one, you need to do in a washing station for 3 minutes, and then you need to post-process and CURIE for this profile for that long. So as far as FDA is concerned, you followed everything from start to finish. Okay, so you won't have any issues if FDA ever comes knocking. Because if you're changing out your protocols, like say, for example, I want to use this printer for this curing unit for this, and this washing station for this. Somewhere along the line, I might not be doing something as a verified protocol. Now, if you're doing a dental model, it's not a big deal. Nobody cares because none doesn't go inside the mouth. But if you're putting something inside the patient's mouth, you need to have a validated system. And that's one of the reasons why in the beginning I got this printer, because it was a dental printer. Okay, where the other ones I had weren't fully validated. Okay, but down the line, I really like the ease of use, so I kind of stuck with it, and I got a second one. Okay, how many? Is it? Lucian's asking me, is available flexible resin, flexible partial dentures, and how is it compared to ejection flexible partials? So I haven't used any flexible partial resin on this printer or other ones, but I do know there is a flexible partial resin out there. My buddy Mark Chan has used it. I'm not sure if he used it in this one or a Sega, but that's something I can look into and maybe follow back with you guys on that. How many joules of power does the CURIE have? You know what? I haven't. Oh well, here's the answer. It's 70 watts. So okay. Thankfully, I got a team with me that's answering some of these questions. How does CLEANI use less alcohol? So the reason why CLEANI uses less alcohol is because it's actually a narrower tub versus a wider one, so it goes up rather than down, rather than out. So I usually I'll put two 32-ounce bottles in each one of the vats that has in there, so it allows me to fully actually submerge the plate all the way up to the handle, and the prints reach all the way down. And what I usually do for that also, once my dirty vat gets too dirty, I'll put the resin into a special container and I'll leave it outside to make sure that all the alcohol will evaporate, and then I'll have the outside light will actually cure the resin that's left in there. And once it's fully cured, you can actually dispose it in regular garbage. You can also recycle the alcohol if you wanted to. I don't do enough printing to where I'm worried about it because I'm a smaller lab. We're just me and my wife here. So, but if you do a lot of printing, you might want to look into like alcohol recycling. But what I do from that point, by that point, when this first vat gets kind of dirty, I'll actually put the second, the clean alcohol in there into the first dirty one. This way, I'll just kind of switch vats every time and I'll refill the clean one from that point. Okay. Question for me: can you describe the difference of most popular temp denture teeth resins and the denture-based material they've used? Why you prefer one resin over the other? So when it comes to denture teeth resins, the reason why I like this new one that I've been using, it's a sculpture, is because it's highly filled ceramic, so the wear resistance is quite a bit. One thing I do want to warn you guys about: when you're dealing with these resins for teeth, if it's a highly filled ceramic one, it will there's a specific protocol for washing it, because the second that stuff touches alcohol, it starts to get that white film on it, which you will later need to get rid of. But if you adjust your cleaning protocols, and you can reach out to these companies and they can show you how it's done, you can minimize the amount of cleaning you need to do from the resins. But I do also recommend getting the bleach shades rather than A1 or A2, because I like to usually stain up, because these are still going to be quite opacious because it's a print, right? And to build the translucency and things like this, you can really achieve it a lot better by adding either OptiGlaze or accent stains to it to get it from their point. But if I'm just doing a temp, I don't usually do just the teeth. I do the whole thing in white, and I really like using the GC temp resin for that. Does the CLEANI have a programmable times? Yes, it does. So, in a way, there's three of them. There's a 3-minute, 5-minute, and I think there's a 10-minute. So you can't really adjust it exactly like 3 minutes and 30 seconds. But usually within 3 minutes is most of the time. I don't think I've ever used 5 minutes. For most resins, I want to go 3 minutes or below. If I need to go below, I'll just use my Apple Watch and get that adjusted to that time and stop it beforehand. Okay, is Ackuretta printer validated for graphite resins? I'm not sure. There's quite a big list, and there's only a few resins that I use, so I don't know all of them. That's something maybe the Ackuretta folks can answer for you. Does the Soul have a VAT heater? No, it does not have a VAT heater. I haven't had to use a VAT heater for any of my resins, not just with the Soul, for any of my printers, because my printer's in my lab and it's 70 degrees in my lab, and I haven't had any issues with heating the resins. But you can buy aftermarket uh, VAT heaters, as far as I know, and utilize those. I'm not sure if you can use it on the Soul, because the Soul has the actual lock for the VAT on the outside. So that might be something you need to look into, but I've never had to use one. Um, what's the difference between the Soul and the Asiga printers? So Soul is an LCD printer versus Asiga is a DLP, which is a digital, I think digital light projection or something like that. So that's two different types of printers. Okay. Does Soul have an internal radiometer? I do not have an answer to that question. I'm sorry, Dan. Okay, let's move on, because we're already at 2:37. I barely touched on stuff. Let's move on. So usually when you're going to be dealing with scans, a lot of times you'll get something like this from the office. Okay, so they'll use an intraoral scanner and they'll bring it in, and you get something like this. So that's something like this you can't print right away. So you need to create. If this was from 3Shape, for example, you need to convert that to an STL file, and then use some kind of software to make a model from it. So I used to export these as STLs, and in Mesh Mixer I would create the models, and or in 3Shape you'll create the models and print them. But nowadays with Medit Link, so you can just take this, bring it into Medit Link, change it first into a from DCM to STL, very easy, just one button click, and then from that point on, I'll use, well, this is what I use, Medit DCM converter, so DCM to STL, and then I would utilize Medit Design to clean things up, and then Medit Model Builder to build a model. Okay, and after that, I will actually bring that into my slicing software. So this is pretty much a run up of what I usually do. So let's say we have an STL file that we need to print a model. So I named this one test. So I bring that in, and I can attach that file right there through that button. So I'm attaching an upper and a lower model. Well, not a model, a scan for this particular test patient. And as you can see right here, once it gets attached, I'll need to go into the Medit Design to clean up everything, because once they're in, well, first I need to assign lower to lower, upper to upper. I mean, not assign, but choose which ones I'm going to be working with. But you can see right here, I got a couple of holes in my scans that I want to fix, as one right there. And I got a couple of areas maybe that I want to extend first before building models. So there's one there, and there's one on the lingual of the lower right here that I want to fix. So with dental design, what's nice about it, it's got all these options over here. So I got a bridge tool right here. What I'm going to use is I'm going to bridge some areas first, and you can make it wider or narrow if you want to. So I'm going to bridge one right here. Now, don't worry about the hole there, because there's another option down the line which is going to fix that hole for me. So I'm going to bridge right here, and I'm going to go to the upper scan, and I'm going to bridge so I can extend some of the areas right here, just so it's prettier. I don't necessarily have to bridge it there, but since I'm already here, I'm going to make my job a little bit easier down the line by just extending that model with a bridge option and filling those holes down the line. So we're going to rotate. Now, I'm not very used to doing things with this software yet, so I have made a few mistakes. One of the things that I have had issues with is just utilizing the mouth, not the mouth, a mouse. Sorry, I can't talk today. The controls are a little bit weirder than my 3Shape and Mesh Mixer. So now I've actually ended up fixing those areas, and I can choose the fill hole option, and you can adjust the size of the hole you want to fill. You don't want to go too high, because it's going to close off the top for you. And now it's all fixed, right? So from this point, I need to just save it and then move to the next app. And the next app we're going to be utilizing, so I'm going to overwrite everything and go from here to actual Medit model app. So it's right there on the very top. So Medit Model Builder. We're going to open that up, and we're still going to be utilizing the same files, but the files have been fixed now. Because if we could try to build those models with all those holes and everything else, it might have some issues, first of all, and also it's not going to look that good. But now that we fixed those, we'll assign maxilla to maxilla, mandible to mandible, and bring that in. So the next step, we're going to actually designate the area that we're going to be creating a model from. So it automatically shows you the area, and you can adjust it lower or higher. So you have these areas where you can use a brush to build that up, or you can create like a poly line to create a large area if you want to select the entire thing. Okay, so here I'm just using a brush to bring a couple of more areas that I want to be part of the model, which was in this particular case wasn't really necessary because I was just going to utilize the tooth portion, but I wanted to make it a little bit prettier, a little bit more exact. Let's put it that way. So we've chose the selections for our models, and the next step is going to be the orientation of what do you call it? Orientation according to the plane of occlusion. So we're going to pass this point, go next. And now we're going to be, you can use 3-point selection, as it shows right there, alignment mode, or you can just start moving the models. The 3-point kind of gives you a nice alignment to begin with, and you can just adjust it in these areas from that point on. So if I want to change the angle a little bit, maybe a midline if I wanted to, and I should have changed the midline here a little bit, but I didn't. This is for free software, guys, you can't go wrong. This is amazing. And from this point, you can choose different base types. So you can use the ortho one, you can use the full arch one, as you can see on the bottom, or you can use just a palateless model. Plateless model, sorry. I like to use the full arch one because if you're doing an articulated option, it just makes it a lot easier to articulate. Now you can change the bases to be lower or higher. You can make them hollow, or you can make them solid. I prefer to print hollow models for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, because it makes it a lot easier for things to kind of to print. You don't create that suction effect, and also when you're printing hollow, you're going to be using a lot of resin. But if you want to print them solid, I do highly recommend that you guys put drain holes in there, because you don't want to create that suction in there. And even if you're printing hollow, but printing hollow without supports, I still recommend putting drain holes in there. So here we just have our models created, and you can go straight to finish, click on the very right side, click straight to finish if you don't want to do an articulated option. But in this case, I was going to show you guys how to do articulated option. Now, I'm not doing any dies, so I'm just going to click on the articulation mode. And it showed me here that because of the scan, I had some overlapping areas, and it was asking me which ones I wanted to remove. Now, usually if I'm going like a splint on the upper, I'll probably remove the stuff from the lower, or vice versa. Or you can just leave it on there, but it won't occlude properly if you do. So it automatically brought in 3 supports, and I could just leave it like this, or I can adjust it. Just be careful when you adjust things. If you adjust it too much, you'll see it change colors. If it changes colors, that means it's not working properly. So you want to move it towards back to the blue color, as you can see right here. But if I wanted to, I can actually add another support. And if I wanted to print 4, so now I have an extra one. I'm just going to align things and make things where you got 4 things. Okay, so I'm actually going to move forward, because we're kind of running out of time. There's an option after that to add writing to it if you wanted to. But we're actually not going to wait for that. Okay. Once you get things printed, once you get things designed, you need to actually run it through a slicer software. So this is just a little video of how I utilize the slicer software in my workflow. So I'm going to open up. I usually end up opening up my Alpha AI, which kind of looks like this when it's loading. So once it loads up, I have all these options on here. Now, on the top, if you get the premium version, you'll see the bridge, the crown, the splint options. But on the left, you're going to see a different printer, so you can choose, and different resins. So let's say, for example, I'm printing a model. And I'm printing a model. In this particular case, I was using the CURIE Element White, and I was using the. If you choose Sol, it chooses a Sol large build plate. You can choose Sol medium and choose Sol small, but not all the resins have parameters for those plates. Okay, just be aware of that. So um, for this one, I could have probably fit 2 models on there, maybe not this large ones, but if you have smaller models and if you're printing them flat, you can sometimes fit 2 of them. If you want to print 2 models vertically, you can do that, but I don't recommend doing that when you have an articulated option. Okay. So the best design you're going to get with these, best fitting you're going to get is printing them flat like this, because it creates the least amount of distortion occlusally. So you could choose different options, like these squares on the left. If you press them, it kind of rotates the model for you. But if I want to select an area that I want to adapt to the plate, so I'm going to press select base and just click on that area of the model, and it automatically pushes it on there. Now, I could print this flat on there, but I don't like doing that for a couple of reasons. I want supports because I want that internal stuff supported. So I'll choose a support option, and I usually do general instead of structure because general has they're not as robust. Okay, structure creates more robust supports, which is great for printing, but it's a little bit harder to remove them sometimes. And if you're using thicker resins, it's a little bit harder to wash them out. So I usually just do general auto supports on there. So from here, once I've generated my supports, I will choose a slice option. And from the slice, I usually print on standard, which is 100 microns. And if you want to do adjustments, you can add some time to your prints, which I highly don't recommend you guys do, because usually they've kind of worked out pretty well for those adjustments. And if you're going to add time to it, you're going to probably overcure stuff. What I do this sometimes is I'll reduce the time for cure on base layers, because I think when they designed it, they wanted to make sure that those base layers cure properly, and they sometimes cure them so much that I have a hard time removing them from the build plates. So I've actually what I've done is I've reduced the time so I can remove it a little bit easier from the build plate. But be careful there. If you're just starting out, if you reduce it too much, you're going to end up getting failed prints. And oftentimes with failed prints, it's usually from my end. I've looked up on my printer, because you can run diagnostics and see how many prints you printed. And so on one of my printers, I printed 120 or 130 prints, and I've had, I think, about 12 failures, because it shows you how many prints you failed, because it asks me, have you been successful or not? Because if you haven't been successful, you can press yes, and it gives you an option for a cleaning cycle where it just cures the bottom layer, so you can just peel it off nice and clean. Okay, so now I just save my file, and then once it's been saved, I'm going to close my software with the slicer software, and through my Google Chrome, what you can see is that actually on top I've saved my IP addresses for my printers, my Sol 1 and Sol 2, and I just go into my Sol 2 in this case, I think, or Sol 1, and I choose the file that I want to print. And it takes a little bit of time sometimes, depending on, because it's all obviously online, right? Depending on how busy the server is, how large the file is, what your internet is. Sometimes I'll wait like a minute for the file to upload. So take your time. And one of my uploads faster than the other, I just think it's because I haven't updated my firmware on one of my printers, and it's taking a little bit longer. So you just upload, and once you've uploaded, you click ready, and it checks network, so it connects to the actual printer, and it tells you it's going to take 1 minute and 20 seconds to print that model. Now, if you want to start the print straight from your computer, you can uncheck that option and press print. But I recommend you guys don't do that, because I've done this several times where I forgot to put the build plate on, and I've unchecked this and it started to print without a build plate. So this is in there for a reason. Okay. All right. So this is what that model looked like. It was printed. I take that model out, put it in the whole plate in the washing station, run on dirty, run on clean, take that off with that little chisel, put that in my dehydrator for about 10 minutes at 70 degrees Celsius, and then I put in my CURIE. As you can see right there on top, it says CURIE element. Went from there. Now, I was going to show you guys a video on base plate fabrication. Unfortunately, we only have a limited amount of time, and I've spent a lot of time covering things, and I want to make sure to cover a lot more. So I'm going to skip the base plate fabrication video. What I'll actually do for you guys is after this webinar is over, I'll actually narrate this video, and I'll post it on my YouTube channel, and the Ackuretta folks are actually going to post it as well on their stuff. So you'll see what I'm talking about. This kind of shows you how to fabricate a base plate using the Medit link. Okay. This video right here talks about if you're doing a printed denture, for example, how to align it better. So there's a couple of things. When you print it flat like this, you will get the best possible occlusion, but the problem is you'll get you'll get a lot of supports on the integular surface. And if you're trying to print it as a definitive type of appliance where your patient's going to wear it and you're not going to reline it, well, it's going to be a problem. This way will get you the cleanest possible intaglio, but you got all these supports on teeth, which can lead to issues when it comes to occlusion. So what I usually like to do is I like to get the best of both worlds. I'll angle things a little bit differently. So this talks about the actual supports on the intaglio. You see how many supports there are? It just makes it really difficult to reline. But if I'm really difficult to wear. But if I'm doing like a reline impression, that's no longer an issue, right? But if I angle it about 45 to 90 degrees, well, maybe not 90, but about 45 to 70 degrees, usually around 70 degrees, you'll get the best of both worlds, where the teeth are not too fully covered, and you don't have too many supports on the actual intaglial surface. Okay, so this is where I usually print my stuff. This is the one that I like to do the most. Okay, because you can see I got supports on teeth, but not on the occlusion, and not too much on the facial, and supports on the intaglio are not too many as well. But if I angle it even more, it's going to be even less supports on the intaglio. Like look right here. So we're close to 90 degrees right there. You see where I have more supports on teeth, but they're not on the occlusal, and I can clean up still quite a bit on the teeth, especially if I use general instead of structure. The supports are going to be not as aggressive, and it's going to be a lot better. All right, let's move forward. So this video right here talks about the AI option. Okay, so if you guys are first starting out, and I think it costs about $20 a month. What it allows you to do, guys, is that if you're not sure how to align your models and things like this, it will do it for you, for the guide, for the splint, for crown and bridge. So maybe when you're first starting out and getting this software, maybe it's a good way to get things lined up. For me personally, where I like this option, when I'm doing a thimble bar, when I'm doing a bunch of trying crowns on top of it, it's a lot kind of harder to do like 20 crowns when you got to line up each angle, so it just gets just right and do supports for them. The AI option, if I'll just bring the crowns in, activate the crown option, it'll obviously select them all and press the crown option. It'll go through and will actually rotate each one of these to where they need to be and give you the proper position for optimal print for the crown, and you don't have to actually sit there and rotate each one of these, and it goes pretty quick, which is pretty cool option in my opinion. But it's up to you guys, whatever you guys want to do. What's great about the software, there's a free version of it, and then you have the add-ons, okay, that you can get from there. Okay, a couple of things I wanted to cover. This is what I'm known for. There are a lot of things that are dental, but there's a lot of things that are Amazon, eBay, they're not dental, but are great for dental. So when you mix your resins, right, a lot of resins you need to tumble quite for a long period of time, especially if they're highly filled ceramic resin. And they sell dental mixers for that. What I have found, and actually I haven't found this, somebody showed this to me. These rock tumblers, they work really well. So this top portion right here, these are just drums you take out, and the bottle of resin, the round bottles of resin, fit really nicely in there. Pretty much all the sizes I've used so far fit in there pretty well, and you can just turn it on and it will mix resin for you. You can also get one of these. These will work, these will spin a lot quicker, but they're very limited in size. So they will work better for your smaller bottles, thinner, more narrow. I have both of them just simply because I wanted to make sure to try both of them. Now for the square bottles, I honestly don't know why people make resin in square bottles, because it just makes it a lot more difficult to mix. But if you have like a Keystone square bottles, these work pretty well. It costs about $400 for a new one. I found mine used on eBay for about $70, and it does mix it fairly well. Or you can always just mix things by hand. Okay. Now, when you mix the resin quite a bit and you put it inside the vat to print, well, you'll find out you'll have a lot of these little micro bubbles. If you buy one of these little mini heat guns for crafts, and just turn it on and run it over your resin top, don't stay in one place for too long. You don't want to overheat things. But if you run it over the top, it will actually get rid of your bubbles for you, which is great. If you are keeping your resin in the vat for longer than a day, you need to mix that resin in the vat. Now you can use something like a business card or a credit card, or these things right here. They're filler spreaders for automotive industry, and they're really inexpensive. Like 10 pack is like $11. Okay, and the 4-inch one works really well inside the sole. So I just clean that up, not clean it up. I'll just put it in there and mix the resin back and forth to make sure you spread it evenly, because the filler will, because it's a matrix, right? And there's a filler inside that matrix that gives it strength and everything else. So the filler will settle and the matrix will stay on top, and you want to make sure you spread it all the way through, otherwise you get failed prints. So I'll mix it in there, and once it's dirty, I'll just throw it in my CLEANI, and when I clean my prints, it just cleans it for me. So it's reusable. But if you have that resin, let's say like I print today and I'll leave the resin there over the weekend, don't mix it by hand. Every time I've had a failed print, 90% of the time, because I got lazy, I didn't dump the vat into the bottle and mix it properly. Because if it sits there too long, you're not going to be able to spread it properly with a spreader. So make sure you mix it inside the bottle. FEP film or NFEP film, which is better than FEP. So your vats will have this certain film in there, and so over time these things will wear out, they'll break. If you don't know what you're doing, please don't replace it by yourself, because you can ruin your printer this way. I'm sure Ackuretta or other companies have a service they can probably replace your film for you or sell you a new vat. But if you've been doing this for a while, know what you're doing, you can buy an FEP film and replace it. What I like about the actual vats for the sole, the film is actually recessed inside the vat. So if I take the vat out, now I can put it on the flat surface without worrying that I'm going to damage the film, because the screws are actually below the film, which is great, because my other, like my frozen printers, don't have that, and I have to make sure, like, be very careful when I'm placing it. So it's one of the design things that I really like about the sole as well. This thing that Jed Archibald showed me, these are little waterproof silicone things for cleanup, because when you're printing things, they can get pretty messy pretty quickly. These little doggy cleanup pads, Esther Schwenning showed me these. These are great, because once again, cleanup stuff. These are the rags that I like to use for cleaning up 3D printing stuff. They're actually, I think they're made kind of like paper, but they're feel like cloth. But what's great about it, they don't have any fibers, so it cleans up everything very nicely. Doesn't scratch things. So when I'm cleaning the vat, it works really well. You're going to be using a lot of gloves when you're 3D printing, because you got to take stuff out, you got to clean stuff up. It always gets messy. Using dental gloves or regular polyvinyl, not polyvinyl, but regular nitrile gloves just takes a lot of money. Plus, you're putting a lot of this stuff in the landfills and everything else. It's just not great for the environment. These poly gloves are a lot cheaper, and they don't take up as much space, and you're not creating as much mess for the environment. So highly recommend you get these poly gloves for food service for that. When you're putting resin back into the from the vat into the uh, container, you obviously want to use some kind of funnel. These funnels are great. They're kind of small though, so if you have a lot of resin that you're trying to dump at the same time, these probably won't work very well. But if you have not a lot of resin in that and you want to pull, it has a little filter in there, and it makes sure that what it does, it filters out any kind of sediment that you create. Maybe like a piece of a support broke off and you didn't see it. You want to make sure it doesn't go back into your bottle with that stuff. Okay. Alcohol, you got to clean with alcohol. So most places I buy alcohol either on Amazon or Walmart. Walmart alcohol is 91%, works great for 3D prints. Actually, some people say 91 is actually better than 99. But if you don't buy the alcohol at Walmart, I like getting at Walmart because a lot of times I'll go like shopping for groceries and I'll grab a couple of bottles right there. I don't have to order it. Or you can just order, like last time I just ordered two 6-packs, not beer, but alcohol. I don't know how that works. And they just shipped it to me for free. Or was it 4 6-packs? I can't remember. Or you can just get it from Amazon, which is going to be a 99% one. You can also get them in the 1-gallon containers, and they work pretty well for that. This is a dehydrator that I use for my thing. I just took these trays, I kind of glued them all together with some tape, and I cut the middle out just so I have one big tray. Or you can buy just the shelf ones. It's all up to you guys. I'd like this one because it's a smaller size. That's why I got it. Lubricant. Make sure you guys lubricate your Z-rails. I have a couple of, I think I've had a video on Instagram and I think on Facebook as well on how to lubricate the Z-rail, because over time that lubrication goes away. And if you don't have your Z-rail on your printer properly lubricated, it can lead to a lot of issues down the line. Also, when I clean up my resin from my vat, I'll put a couple of drops on the film itself. Obviously not on the screen side, but the side where you put the actual resin. I'll put a couple of drops in there and just going to rub it into the film and then wipe it off, just so because the film will wear out over time, and this lubricant, this particular lubricant, will make it last a little bit longer. Okay, this is compressed air duster that it's created for the keyboards, but I love this thing. Especially if you're a one-person lab, you don't want to run your compressor all the time. So I use this thing a lot of times to dry off my models, to do things from that point. You don't for 3D printing, I'll blow off the alcohol with this first before putting in dehydrator, so it just works a little bit faster. And if you're doing like a 2-part denture and the teeth, and you want to glue them together before curing them, these little flashlights will cure the resin to kind of glue them together before you fully cure them inside the CURIE. Okay. All right. And just one last thing I wanted to mention. I will have another course besides the ones in Chicago. In March, I'll have another course in Montana. I forgot where I have the course in Billings, Montana, which is going to be a 2-day course. And day 1, we're going to be covering implant removable prosthetics, the protocols associated with it. And on day 2, we're going to talk all about customization of digitally printed or hand fabricated restorations with composite and optiglaze color. Okay. So I think from this point we're going to and also I forgot to mention the registration for that course is at globaldentalgallery.com, and if you use a promo code I wrote wrong code on here. 2023 will be the right code. Sorry, I didn't adjust this picture. So code 2023 will give you a discount on that course. Sorry, Julie, went too long again.
No worries, Eugene. Look, I love the fact that you're giving like a real life perspective on 3D printing. So I really appreciate that from you, because there are some little extras that are required for a good setup. I think we all know that, right?
Yes, and one thing I forgot to mention that I really wanted to touch base on is that, guys, all these all these printers, they all say like, just take it straight out of the box, it will print. Yes, it will definitely do this, but you need to have a certain amount of skill yourself. You need to know the protocols yourself to properly align things. You need to know how to rotate the prints. You need to know where the supports need to be. If you have this huge print with 3 supports, if you just get the angle way too wrong and you just got a couple of supports on this huge structure, well, obviously it's going to fail. So you need to have a certain amount of skill to build up, and that's where these webinars come in, and the videos on YouTube and everywhere else. And also, this AI thing is also kind of helpful as well. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. Like from our side, we try to support everywhere we can and like make it as easy as possible. So when you were talking about the VAT film, for example, so our recommendation as a company is, of course, to not do that yourself, but rather to purchase the VATs entirely, because just a real fact is, it's something you'd have to do yourself, and to be honest, it doesn't really make that much of a difference in that case, right? So
Yeah.
that's our recommendation, to just purchase multiple VATs and just keep your resin in the vat, stored away, protected from UV light. That's a key thing. So
Yeah, they'll last a lot longer, and just make sure it's just I've seen too many people when they change out the FEP film, don't screw it in correctly, or they buy the film that's not correct, and next thing you know, you have like a perforation. Now, if you got like a $200 printer and you ruined it, yeah, that's fine. But if you just saved yourself like $100 replacing some film,
yeah.
instead of having somebody else do it, and next thing you know, you did it wrong, and you leaked all that resin inside your LCD screen and went down into your things. It just creates quite of a nightmare.
So yeah, I think the moral of the story is, buy a VAT entirely. I think that makes everyone's life easier, and then you don't have to do any screwing. So I think that's the key message with our entire printing system anyways, is, we take away the room for user error as much as we can. And that's also the whole situation with Alpha AI and the premium functions, right? Alpha AI works in a way where the orientation is set for, best success, and the supports as well. So there, we really want to remove the, people like to experiment sometimes as well, and that's fine. Like that's
I'm that guy.
Use manual setting. I know a lot of the people we work with are relatively like advanced users, so they have some knowledge. But for people just starting out, like, doing orientation and support is going to be a really important thing to avoid failures.
Yeah, I mean, like I was mentioning earlier, there's two ways to get into this. You can do it like I did it, like from the very beginning, not knowing anything, and just going at it nice and hard, trying to figure out each parameter, see why it's failing 50 million times. Or if you don't have the time, or if you just not that kind of person, you can go this route. But also, important to know, one of the main reasons I went this route is because certain things need to be FDA verified, and that just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. All right. Let's get in some questions. You've already answered quite a few in the middle of the session. So let's see what we still have. So one of the question was like, what's the big difference from a SIGA, or like what's the advantage of an LCD printer over a DLP? Eugene, you don't have an ASIGA. Do you have like a bit of an answer to it? I'll be happy to also like add from our perspective.
You know what? I don't know much about DLPs.
Okay.
I'd rather have you take care of this, because I've always been an LCD guy right from the start. So that's what I'm kind of used to.
All right. So basically, DLP printers, there's also big variance, right? So there's a bunch of DLP printers, which are great. And ASIGA is definitely a really good printer. ASIGA is a DLP printer. Ackuretta printers are monochrome. The Soul is a monochrome LCD printer. And basically the difference is on how the light is projected and how the curing happens, right? A DLP printer works with a projector, while an LCD printer works with a mask. So now where we can say there's an advantage is that it's more direct with an LCD printer, right? Projector means you have to have like a mirror in the middle, and that'll project then. Which there is some debate about whether or not this would be more or less accurate. There are some studies that are looking at this as well. Lots of different information, basically just saying it's two different ways to get to a good result. And that's my personal opinion. And the LCD printers, so some have argued that there would be, you would have to replace things more often. That is not the case. The Soul LCD panel has a lifespan of 10,000 printing hours. Eugene, have you run through one at this point?
No.
Exactly.
But plus it also comes with a second LCD screen.
Yeah. And so how long have you been printing with your first printer? It's been...
time ever since COVID, the time is kind of hard to understand. Has it been a year? Has it been 2 years? I think it's been 2 years. No.
Yeah, it's been 2021. I remember that's when we first had our conversation, so it must have been then.
Yeah, so it's about
Yeah,
2 years. Yeah.
yeah,
I've
pretty reliable.
honestly, and then it comes with it. So it comes with two vats and it comes with two screens. And the second screen is just when the first one wears out. It's a fairly easy way to replace it. That's another thing you want to have a printer that's going to be easily serviceable.
Yeah.
With LCDs, it's a little bit easier to deal with than DLPs, from what I know, because DLPs is like it's you definitely can't replace those things yourself. You have to send that to a place to
And
get it.
so, where I can also say that we really have an advantage in the market as Ackuretta is that we offer a fully validated workflow, which means when we work with resin manufacturers and we have over 150 resins validated for the system, right? Um, that means that the resin manufacturer actually validates and tests not just the printer, not just the slicing software, but also, the wash protocol and then also the curing unit. So a lot of other printers on the market don't actually offer a reliable curing unit that would actually cure at that standard. So they would have to recommend you a different system at that point. Um, yeah, so for the Curie is really nice for, and like I said, it's tested. So the resin manufacturer actually makes sure that we meet biocompatibility standards with it and the mechanical properties are aligned with what they're looking for. So that's really where we have an edge. And I think one other thing is to the footprint of the system in comparison to a lot of other printers. It's really nice. It fits in perfectly in a spot. And if you go check out Eugene's Instagram, you'll see some nice videos of it and images of it where, yeah, just fits in nicely in any space. I mean, I personally think it's pretty. I'm not sure if that matters to anyone.
Well, you gotta make it pretty. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
You
does.
gotta make it pretty, right? And yeah, so the footprint's really nice. The open system is really the where it is and it has an edge, and the ease of use. Like Eugene said, right? You can take it out of the box and start using it. Of course, you know if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, then it'll be a bit tricky. But I think anyone can start out with a nice model workflow where you use Medit, the Medit app to get the design done, and I think that's a something to that anyone can start figuring out relatively quickly. I would argue.
And the models are going to be probably the first thing most people do, because
Yeah.
I have a friend right now who's got a denture lab too, and then the first thing because they're getting scans in from these dentists, and they got to print models, so that's the first thing they're trying to learn. Even not if they don't have a scanner, but they do have a
Mhm.
printer. And in the beginning, what I recommended people do was to get a scanner first, just to kind of start getting information stored and everything else. Nowadays, if you don't want to get one, I still highly recommend you get a scanner
Mhm.
first. But if you don't want to get one, you can, if you're just getting files in, then yeah, you can probably just get a printer and get things printed model wise.
All right, we have a question from Lucian. Okay, I'm not going to try to say that last name. So the question is a flexible resin available for flexible partial
I,
dentures
I,
and
I,
how
I
does
try
that
to
work?
answer that one. I just don't know if it
Okay.
is available or not.
All right, Lucian, how about you send me like a message. You can find me maybe on Facebook or on our website. My name is Julia. I hope I said that in the beginning of the webinar. Um, and there's only one Julia at Acurate, so that makes it a little bit easier. And then I'll check out our resin list, and then I can give you an answer on that more concretely. Because when there is 150 resins, sometimes I don't know all of them by heart either. So, all right. Then from Dan, we had a different question, and I think you've already answered that, right? So if the sole printer will work with a different curing unit like the auto flash, it will work. So really what the recommendation is to be always checking with the instructions for use by the resin manufacturer. So the key thing is that they will have a list of different printers there, and they will tell you for the printer and for their curing units respectively, like what's the workflow. And I mean, since autoflash is so widely used, there'll be some answers on that one for sure. I think in the chat we had now a different question here. When using a lab scanner, you scan the impression directly, or do you still need to pour a model?
So it depends. It actually depends on the type of impression. So if you have an impression for a partial, you probably want to pour a model first, because a lot of times, well, depending on the scanner too, some scanners are better than others. But if you have a lot of undercuts in that impression, the light doesn't get to that area, and you can't get a really good scan of that. Now, you can probably get away by scanning that impression with a intraoral scanner and get better design. But the lab scanner that I have a DOF HD scanner, and whenever I try to scan impressions with like with a lot of undercuts, I didn't get really good results with it, and I ended up having to um, pour that up first and then scan it. Um, but even if I have a full denture impression, you can scan that in pretty easily and create a model from that. I oftentimes will still pour the model and scan that in simply because my protocol is not fully digital. I'll still process on a stone model. So it's a lot easier for me to pour up that stone model first, scan that in, create my base plates, which will fit wonderfully to my uh, to my stone models, which I can't tell you how happy I am not having to have to do base plates and custom trays by hand anymore. It's just been such a blessing. But I will still process on that stone model. Now you can just scan the full denture impression and create a digital file and print the model from there if you wanted to.
All right, we had some more soul questions, so I guess I'll address those. So, does the soul have an internal radiometer? The soul does not have an internal radiometer, but that's just based on how the printer is built. So, it does have a dynamic backlight and like 54 individual LEDs. And what that does, it really controls the power output, and it really controls where, what area of the LCD is lit up. So what we're focusing on is that only the area that needs to be actually cured is going to light up, and it doesn't, there's no leakage in that area. And what that does, it helps really avoid like degradation of the entire LEDs, right? LEDs over time will possibly go down in power output. And so what you can do with that is if you have individual LEDs, you can individually calibrate them to adjust the power. What happens on the cheaper printer spectrum is that, one side of the LED starts degrading, the other side doesn't, and then you have to ramp up the power for all of them. And then what happens is you have unequal power output, which means one side has a higher power output than the other. Yeah, and that leads to, not nicely done curing, basically, like uneven curing. Yeah.
So one thing that Dan was mentioning, and I kind of don't have an answer for that. How often should you replace your LEDs in your Curie?
If you notice that there is like degradation on the power output of your Curie, you should be contacting the manufacturer. That's it. Like there is no, we don't recommend that you do any of that replacement yourself. If you feel like the Curie's power output is not as strong enough, or if you want to actually do a test for this, contact Ackuretta or contact your distributor, whoever you bought it from, and we'll run the test with you, and then we'll have an answer on that as well.
Great,
So
thank
that's
you.
not a recommendation. So a lot of these things when of course you use these products and you have them in your hand every day, right? And you're savvy, you're tech savvy. So I have a lot of trust in you, Eugene. For the average user, I would always say if you feel like something you have a question about, always reach out. Acuretta has an amazing support team. I know Jessica's actually also joining this webinar right now. So our support team is really fantastic, and they will have an answer to you really quickly. There's a ton of tests that we can run with you to just determine if your printer's working efficiently. So there's no DIY needed, really. That we want to avoid that at all costs because this is a dental printer, and at that point it needs to be as easy for you to use as possible. And yeah, so on our website you'll find like a support tab. We actually just launched our user dashboard with lots of information as well. And yeah, we have a ton of material available for everyone and a great support team that will guide you through every one of those steps. And I think, Eugene, you've had some good experience with our support team as well.
Yes, I actually reached out to Jessica this morning. I needed to find out the curing for one of the residents, and I didn't see it because I've been a little lazy. I haven't updated my Curie profiles, so I'm like, where is it? So I just reached out. She got back to me pretty quickly. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, Jessica is really on it all the time, so we all really appreciate that. And yeah, Jessica was just saying, come see us in Chicago, and yeah, please do. Jessica and I will be there. Eugene will be there. The Ackuretta team will overall also be there. So if it's CDS, Midwinter, or LMT, definitely come by. I can pull up our booth information real quick again, and yeah, we'd be thrilled to see you all. I'd love to be like make a show of hands who's coming, but wrong
I'll show
format.
both hands. Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, at LMT we'll be at the West Exhibit Hall booth Q9, and then at Midwinter we'll have 1638. And like I said, right, we'll have a lecture together with Eugene. Actually, like I'm saying together, Eugene will be lecturing, and I'll be standing in the corner waving at you all. So that's my whole goal in this.
That works.
Just cheerleading.
So
And
I'm seeing there's one more question on here that I haven't covered.
okay, what is it? I'm missing it. Well.
Question from Mark. Can you ask Eugene if he thinks he will move to 3D printed permanent dentures anytime soon? So, Mark, it's not that there aren't any resins out there that probably will work for permanent restoration. I've heard some good things, but I've also heard some things that are not so good. Now, is it because the resins are bad, or is it a user error? Like what I was trying to cover before and saying, you know what, you got to make sure you have a validated protocol. Like if you printed it properly, maybe you didn't post cure properly, maybe you over cured or you under cured. Because if you over cure things, it's always just as bad as under curing it. So problem is that I've been doing this for a few years. Don't want to say a lot of years. I've been doing this for a few years. And over time, I've seen companies just come out with the greatest and latest and say, you know what, this is awesome. You don't have to do things by hand anymore. You can just 3D print permanent dentures. It'll be great. And then 6 months down the line, they're like, no, this resin is not good. And a year later, oh, this resin is not good. And I got tired of being the paying full price for something that doesn't work. I got tired of being that test subject. So at this point, I'm looking for somebody else to do that because I think I've spent enough money um, paying for things and buying things where they didn't work and they just been laying on my bench for a year or 5 years. I want to see results where it's at least, I'm not saying 5 years down the line, but I want to see like a denture that's been in the mouth for 2 years and it looks great and there's nothing been wrong with it. So that's why I'm doing temporary ones right now. Now, are they long-term temporaries? Yeah, I'm doing some long-term temps as well, but I'm just not comfortable enough to call them a definitive restoration just yet, simply because it's me. Because I'm that kind of guy that I just want to make sure it's good, and I feel comfortable putting it in the patient's mouth for 5 years without having any issues. Okay.
He was just saying, do you like the patent sculpture base resin? Is the color good? That is actually a question from Dan Elfring.
I like the color. The thing is, you have to, like I was saying earlier, you want to get the light color. I wouldn't get the darker ones. I'd get the bleach shade and just stain up. Um, because, and also you need to be careful when you're working with these resins. So let's say, for example, you need to cure it. I'm going arbitrary numbers. Cure the denture base for 10 minutes. You need to cure the teeth for 15 minutes. Okay, so you've done that. You cured the teeth for 15 minutes, you cured the denture base for 10 minutes, and then you got to join them together and cure that also. Well, now you've went full cure at this point. When you're joining them together, curing them again, you went over the allotted time. And if you go over the allotted time, you're going to change the shades on your resin. And it doesn't always just go dark, it can go green on you. So you want to do some math beforehand. So for me, like for example, like I know that it's going to take me like say 3 minutes to join this together, and then I also need to do some staining on it and some gingival stuff on it. That's going to do another 3 minute cure, for example. So I'm going to under cure it by 6 minutes, and then when I finish everything else, I'm still going to be at my 10 minute a lot of time without over curing things. Okay, so go with bleach. And stain up to A1, B1, whatever. I mean, there's a ton of courses, and courses I teach also how to go from one shade and get to a different one from that point on.
Yeah, and the Pacton team, by the way, Dan, is also going to be at LMT. I think they're pretty close to our booth actually, and so they'll be. I'm sure they'll be happy to give you a full run through on how to work with their resin exactly, and yeah.
Yeah, their tooth resin is really great. I mean, that stuff is like really highly filled ceramic, so the wear on that sucker is going to be amazing for sure. And printing it was pretty easy. It's just the cleaning portion of it, because what I did in the beginning, I just dumped the whole thing into the CLEANI for 3 minutes each cycle, and it just has that white film on it, which is not a huge problem because I oftentimes will just go with a not a micro brush. What are they called? The silicone abrasion wheels, and I'll just clean that off, and it just gets rid of that white thing. Or you can, the recommended protocols, I think it's on their website, is just spraying it with alcohol, wiping it first, and then running it through a smaller cycle, and that way your white buildup is going to be a lot less on it, so you don't have to take as much off. So, but I've been able, like with bleach shades, with the lighter shades, I've been able to stain things up and get A1, A2 really easily.
All right. Okay, Dan. I hope we covered your question there. I see Mark's asking another question. Actually, just
Okay.
keeps going. I got Mark. Let's see. I see you doing some try-ins digitally. Are you then using that to aid processing, or you doing a whole new wax up setup?
So the way that I do things digitally for try-ins is a little bit different because I can do a try-in with just a whole printed monolithic, and if I do that, then I will probably use that to do a printed temporary denture. But my protocol for try-ins, for my digital try-ins, is I'll do setup in three shape utilizing a carded tooth. So for example, if I got some carded teeth right here. These are actually Physiodents, but I use VitaPen XL teeth. And there's a library for VitaPen XL inside three shape. So I'll do my digital setup, and then I'll print the base plate alone without teeth, and it will have the actual areas for the teeth to be positioned in. So I'll place the teeth inside the base plate. If the base plate is perforated and my tooth goes through, I'll actually grind the tooth on the underside, on the basal surface, so it's nice and flat with a base plate, and I'll adhere the teeth to the base plate with wax and send that for a try-in. And if all looks good, then I'll just process it normally. Now, why do I do the setup digitally? A couple of things. Number one, it's a little bit quicker for me to do it digitally than rather do it by hand, because when I print the base plates, I just stick the teeth in, it goes really quickly. Number two, it fixes the issue with move the midline to the left or to the right by 2 millimeters so much easier than it does when you do things by hand. So when I set cases up digitally, it tells me like move the midline. I just open up three shape, click, move, done. If I'm doing it by hand, I got to take all the teeth out, move everything, and it's just and move things out. Now, do I need to print it on the base plate? Absolutely, I do. But once again, it's just fairly easy. Pop it in, load it with wax and everything else. I'll be showing some of these cases in Chicago, start to finish. So if you guys are going to be there, you can definitely see everything that I usually go through when it comes to these kind of protocols.
All right, cool. We'll be sure to have some resin for you ready. All right, cool. I think we've covered all the questions. Let me see if I've missed anything, but it's looking good. Yeah, and like I said, right, if you want to continue this conversation, guys, feel free to reach out to Eugene or to me directly. You can also reach out to Ackuretta on our Facebook or on our. Oh, I feel like Ria still had a question. Oh, she's typing. Let me see real quick. I just saw that she was typing, and I think she asked a question. Oh yeah. Oh wait. Did you already talk about this? Can you describe the differences of the most popular temp denture teeth resin and the denture base materials that you have
I
used?
talked about this, yeah. I mean,
So,
and also I can't talk about all the resins obviously because I haven't used them
yeah.
all. It's just the ones that I like. I like the GC Temp resin, the light one, not the dark one. I don't like the dark one; it's too dark. And I always go with light ones nowadays, anyways. A lot of times I'll test like A1, A2. The companies will send me a couple of different resins to try, and I just realized, you know what? If I really want to get that shade down on, just go light and just stain out because you want to get like even if they send you like A1, for example, it'll be A1, but it'll be A1 all the way throughout. And we've known, looking at the shade guide, it's more yellow here, it's got more white here, things like this. So if you want to create a more aesthetic result, you got to do custom.
All right, cool. Good. I think that we've covered it. Thank you so much, Eugene. I know that there was a bit more things that you want to talk about, so I guess we'll have to do that somehow
I'll
separately.
actually, I'll talk about some of the stuff in Chicago, but also I'll take some of these videos, I'll narrate them, and I'll post them just so I don't end up missing anything that I wanted to cover today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Like I said, everyone, come join us in Chicago. And if you can't join us in Chicago, we have a webinar coming up again also next week on the 25th. So if you want to find that information, I'll actually just drop the link real quick. And yeah, Eugene, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure working with you. So
Same here.
looking forward to more. And yeah, well, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you all hopefully soon.
See you later, guys. Bye. Thanks.